Hey everyone, Ora here. I hope you're all doing well and you're enjoying the back end of your week. Looking forward to the weekend, hopefully. This video, as the thumbnail suggests, is the Mythic Kel'Thuzad kill. That for me was quite lucky in that we actually managed to get it down in the first part of the raid last night. So we did get a little bit of progress on phase 1 for Sylvanas, which I think is going to be an interesting fight. It's definitely interesting from a Paladin point of view because I'm trying to maximize cooldown usage in places, but we'll get into that when the video comes about. I may actually do phase by phase breakdowns depending on the speed at which we progress. But anyway, so onto the Kel'Thuzad video. We will go straight into it, and while we're going through it, I'll just talk about it. So we're kind of going into the poll. Prior to this, during stream, we had to make a couple of concessions for the intermission damage. We were killing the Soul Reavers far too quickly. And the people responsible for that were primarily myself, one of our warriors, Devil's Fury, and our monk, Hoth. We were incredibly AoE bursty, but also a little bit of RNG in terms of Hoff's damage. So I was the one that was requested to focus more single target. So during the intermission phases, when we've got the 2 abominations up, you'll see that although I do Divine Storm, I only Divine Storm once or twice per intermission, and a lot of my Divine Storm damage throughout the rest of the encounter was actually on ads. Generally like the smaller ads or tank ads. As you saw there, I was killing the bear, and we kind of just blow through everything. We do thankfully stay top. There was an and about had Sunday's previous raid gone ahead, I'd have been going in downstairs into the phylactery. So you can see here that kind of the abominations have pulled out, and execution sentence is the go-to, but we end up with a bit of AoE. We Divine Toll, we use a Divine Storm to use the proc, we wake, and then we go into single target rotation. And I'm swapping between the abominations to try and maintain their health. So they all go down, the Soul Reaver goes down last, and we transition. This transition was really tight, because I remember we got really concerned about it, and we just managed to get through in time. Because the thing with the Kel'Thuzad fight is it is very much a timer-based fight. It's very much about control. So you have instances where you want to kill the ads at a certain speed, because you have about 6 seconds after the first one dies before it resurrects again. And within those 6 seconds, you need to transition the boss. So you need to get the DPS as even as you can, so they all die roughly the same time within about 3 or 4 seconds-ish of Kel'Thuzad transitioning. And then when you're upstairs, as you can see, we have 2 demonic circles placed for the green silence circles, because you put them there so that you keep all the small fixate ads as clumped together and as close together as possible. And you can see that we can knock them back, and we've got our warrior doing a little bit of DPS. Blade storming them. Tauren War Stomp came in handy a couple of times here, because you can remove the fixate portion when you just stun them, which causes them to then reacquire targets, by which point they just stood still. So it's not so, like, the stun becomes more of like an AoE disruption rather than an actual stun. The range DPS was a little bit low on some of these outer ads, so I did swap, which means that my Kel'Thuzad uptime wasn't great, but was still a respectable amount of Kel'Thuzad damage. I think I was 2nd or 3rd total damage done to KT, which was quite nice. You can see that I run to the edge of the room when these mobs spawn, and the reason for that is because if you spawn on their location, or if they spawn on your location, you just get clapped. We had quite a lot of unnecessary deaths, especially with like the abominations, because the abominations will just hit the nearest thing to them until the tanks have aggro, and you don't know which order they're all going to spawn in. So they always roughly spawn in the same locations, roughly. There are a few variants of that. You can see there that we get close. Now, this is an actual really, really interesting bit, because this is actually, like, this wasn't intended. So we go back slightly. You can see here, if I slow it right down, right there. We're in a situation here. Well, Kel'Thuzad has respawned. These Frostbound Devourers have got the buff. However, the Soul Reaver is still in the process of resurrecting, because we literally transitioned this at kind of that 6-second mark. Well, we must have transitioned at about 5.5 seconds. Because the moment, like, the Abomination has just gone down. Kel'Thuzad is returned. These two have got that damage increase buff, because if any undead targets are still alive when Kel'Thuzad returns to the surface, they can no longer be interrupted, they can no longer be CC'd, they can no longer be like do anything, but they're doing like 500% more damage. They slap, and generally this situation should be a wipe, because if a Reaver comes up while Kel'Thuzad's up, you cannot kick their cast, and their cast does increasing damage as the cast goes on. So the first tick of the channel, because what you actually need to do is you need to kick it before the channel starts. So they have like a precast and then it goes into the channel. The precast is what you need to kick, because if they're channeling, they're already doing damage. Because the moment that channel starts, the first bolt goes out. Now, the first bolt itself might not necessarily do a lot of damage, but every subsequent bolt that goes out after that hits like a truck. And with a 500% increase to damage done, even the first bolt will slap. So we're in this situation where it's like, shit. Burn everything. Now, those two go down, but because the Soul Reaver hadn't quite spawned in yet, we end up in a situation where she doesn't actually have the buff, and they can therefore be kicked, and we're really confused about this as the fight goes on. But we take it as a win, we were really lucky, we crack on. You can see that we all run to the Demonic Circle location, so that everything's stacked up as much as we can. Hoff was lucky there with a good roll, and we just kind of deal with the adds. We end up with the spikes as well, so we stack the spikes just in front. And the reason you do it like this is because you're then in a position where you can pop all your cooldowns and you can AoE everything down simultaneously. So you see there that I position myself with a Final Reckoning, because Final Reckoning isn't target capped, and we make full use of that in this particular fight. So you can see that my DPS actually like spikes in these segments, which is really, really good. And it's an argument that you could be made that if you were really padding and you were log hunting, you could even potentially run the Divine Tempest Legendary. And come 9.1.5, if there isn't a 0.5 raid or anything like that to be done, we're probably going to see Ret Paladins doing a lot better passing on this particular fight, because you can just hit Divine Storms with Imperium Power and the Tempest Legendary and just blow through these adds, especially in the later phases. You won't see as much of you won't see much damage in the early phases of the encounter, but as we start getting to these later stages, when there's more and more of those smaller adds, you're going to have a lot more pad damage. But going back to my strat, because my strat was very single target focused, realistically, like this situation here, it gets a little bit hairy because we actually needed to push the damage. You can see there that I sack the tank. I sack one of the tanks. And that's just to try and mitigate some damage that was coming in. Realistically, I probably should have sacked the other tank. I should have sacked our Dorva rather than our bear. But I don't know what all like the danger damage is that our tanks have to deal with. So it gets a little bit hairy, and I just instinctively threw sack out on one of them. This is just a situation where we have to push. We've obviously had one person go down. It's given me wings briefly because I'm using obviously Retribution Aura. When you've got two Paladins, that's usually the beneficial thing to do. And there, that Soul Reaver there got the buff that time because it was still up. However, because we'd kicked it before Kel'Thuzad had returned, we had that momentary gap where we could do some damage. Now, this is the last phase. And this last phase is literally just Bloodlust and Burn. Unfortunately, due to timings and using my Final Reckoning in places where I'm supposed to, you do end up with this natural desync. But that's just because of the speed of the fight, unfortunately. Because you can either use the Final Reckoning on like Kel'Thuzad just as you're about to go into the transition, but that means you're probably not going to get an execution sentence, or you can hold it until you just come back out of the phase and you have your wings, or you can obviously use the 1 minute like I did on the ads. because we still do need that level of damage on the abominations. But that does obviously cause the desync, and the desync meant that I had to then wait to use my cooldowns. So I'm using it in the danger zone as people are dying, and in the end, Kel'Thuzad does go down. So we finished that fight on 10.5k, which I believe, because my guild's still private logs for the time being, and we'll probably private log up until the point Sylvanas is down, and then we start going through our reclears, amounted to about a 77% pass. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It definitely has place for improvement. But again, taking into account the fact that I wasn't running Imperium Power, I wasn't focusing on just blowing up ads given the opportunity, or multiple ads given the opportunity. I was instead trying to balance my DPS between two primary targets while maintaining uptime on Kel'Thuzad. I think overall we came away from that fight really, really well. The only people ahead of us were realistically people that were allowed to AoE spam, or in the case of our Warlock, was designated to target damage because it was destruction and was using Havoc. So all in all, a good fight, certainly enjoyable progress, but I am looking forward to the Sylvanas progress because, especially phase 1 practice that we've seen so far, there is definitely a niche for where our damage sits, and working out where that niche is going to be fun. So over the next few days, we're also going to release a couple of Mythic Plus videos from the back end of last gaming week. So they were Monday, Tuesday keys, and we'll be kind of going over them and discussing them, what went well, what didn't. I did allude to them in yesterday's video for the weekly reset, and that is the fact that one is a 17 top, and the other is a 19 DOS. I do also have a 16 top as well that I may release in conjecture with the 17 top as a side-by-side comparison video, as I became more familiar with the Divine Tempest, or Tempest of the Lightbringer legendary. But to stop this video from waffling on too long, I will end it there. I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care, folks.